Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. Michael Noland here, and tonight I'm going to give my ranking and my choice of rock and roll's top 5 drummers. Now, a couple of these drummers I expect a lot of agreement with, and at least one of these drummers, to those of you who are educated a bit into rock and roll lore, you will probably feel is quite fairly placed in this top 5 position. And at least 2 of these drummers make the top 5 list in most lists. There'll be no surprises there. But maybe, just maybe, I'll give you a clear indication as to why they really truly do belong on the list of the top 5 drummers in rock. Number 5, and this is my choice that I think I'm gonna get a ton of disagreement. But you know what? I'm armed with a fair amount of material here in my choosing. And of course, that drummer is, for years, what people thought a proper rock drummer should be. Richard Starkey, aka Ringo Starr of the freaking Beatles. You know, I'll bet you 99.9% of critics who have put together the top drummers of rock and roll lists for all of us uneducated and unwashed, he wouldn't even wind up in the top 100 on those kinds of lists. In 1973, one of those lists listed him as the 759th best drummer in rock and roll. Can you believe that? All right, so I know that some of you are thinking right now that, well, yeah, he was in a great band and that he was, good enough with the addition of, thank God, 3 other compositional geniuses, that he comes off better than he actually is. But I disagree with that assessment so thoroughly, and I'm gonna give you my exact reasonings for including Richard Starkey, Ringo Starr, as my top 5th favorite drummer of all time in rock. Now, the first 2 reasonings I'm going to use here are really based on circumstances and happenstances only. First of all, Ringo's left-handed. A lot of people don't know that 2 of the Beatles were right-handed and 2 of the Beatles were left-handed. Oh, they know McCartney's left-handed. They could tell that by the way he held his guitar, as opposed to the way that John and George held theirs. We all got the clue immediately, right? But a whole lot of fans, and even fans today, aren't readily aware that Ringo's actually left-handed. Now, why is this so important? Well, first of all, when he began drumming, he just looked around. He saw pictures of drum kits, and they were the very things that told him how to set up his drums. He never even thought of setting his drums up in any other fashion. He just thought, no, that's the proper way drums are set up. And he thought, well, I'm left-handed, but I'll just have to learn to play them proper, or as proper as I possibly can. And by the time he met Paul McCartney or other musicians who were playing left-handed guitars, he probably wasn't even thinking, oh, well, if McCartney plays his guitar this way, maybe I should set my snare off in this direction and my floor tom over here. But no, he never thought about that. He also had met many left-handed pianists, and they weren't reconstructing the piano for their playing. Why should he reconstruct his drum kit? Second of all, he's a small man. He's at least a quarter head shorter than the Beatles, who all claimed for years that they were all 5'10", with Ringo coming in, at 5'7"? He's also a small framed man. He's not a big, burly man. Not at all like the burly and wonderful John Bonham, okay? Now, imagine this. Here you are, a smaller framed man. You've learned to play drums on a right-handed kit, and you're left-handed. What happens as a result of that? You get an almost late approach. You get an almost lackadaisical approach to the drums. And yet every single Beatle track shows that he was right on time. So how could all of this be true? Well, it can be true because he learned to swing by doing this. other drummers would learn to swing far after they actually learned to drum. There is an actual official feel, a swing, that many jazz drummers are just masters at, and Ringo learned the hard way right from the very start because he was 5'0", playing a right-handed kit and being a left-hander. So there's the basis for the Ringo sound. Right there. But on top of all of that, as his basis as a drummer, every single engineer that's ever been interviewed concerning Ringo's timing will tell you he was like a human metronome. The Beatles had no accesses to metronomes in those days. They counted on Ringo's unnerving accuracy as far as maintaining a beat. Now, my next point most people would use to point out why he doesn't belong on this list, and that point is that Ringo is quite a primitive drummer. Ringo wasn't really one of those drummers who knew how to drum in different time signatures. He liked to stay and was most comfortable in 4/4 or waltz time, or 3/4 time, right? But with Paul McCartney, often, especially with John's songs, kind of being more experimental, he would often come up with ideas and suggest those to Ringo, but it was Ringo who translated it. And later, after George had spent some time studying different time signatures and started incorporating those different time signatures into some of his very best work, he would try to explain to Ringo, no, that's when it slips into 7/8 time, and Ringo goes, I don't know that stuff, George. Just strum it along and I'll see what I can do. At one point with Here Comes the Sun, him doing that da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, just to kind of fit it in. But that's one of rock and roll's most best drumming examples that I can think of. That song right there. No. Ringo may have been primitive in his approach, basic in his approach, but he kept up with three of the greatest geniuses in rock and roll, and he never let them down, nor did he leave us down as fans at any point in his career with the Beatles. Now, my number 4 pick, I think I'm going to get some agreement out there, at least with fans who are informed about this guy, and that is the magnificent Jeff Porcaro. Now, Jeff wasn't just the drummer for Toto, folks. Don't get me wrong, he was the drummer for Toto, but he was also the drummer for Steely Dan on many of their cuts. He was the drummer for Carly Simon, Hall & Oates. In fact, you can hardly name an artist in the 70s and 80s he didn't work with. He's on dozens of albums, he's on thousands of recordings, and the man is absolutely stunning as far as his chops. This man is a chop master. This man knows the drums in and out. I first became aware of him because he was on Steely Dan albums. And as you guys know, and there is a Steely Dan video coming up shortly, that Steely Dan occupies a spot on Mount Rock Olympus as far as I'm concerned. Yes, Steely Dan is one of my Olympian level bands, and Jeff Porcaro is just part of that story, but he's an important part. All right, so that leaves us with the big 3. Now, number 3 is what I consider a compositional drummer. And of course, my number 1 spot will have my greatest drummer in rock, also what I consider a compositional drummer. So number 3, Nick Mason of Pink Floyd. Now, for you viewers who aren't drummers, but you know what you like and you know what sounds good to you, all I have to do is point you to Pink Floyd's DVD Live in Pompeii and just watch that DVD. Watch Nick Mason's whole approach to drumming, and I think I'll have you convinced that he belongs at least very high on your favorite list of drummers. But beyond just his obviously wonderful playing on that DVD, I say that he belongs on this list because he was also a compositional drummer, much like John Bonham. He puts pieces together. He also puts tape loops together and presents those as artistic statements. This man isn't just thinking about the skins on the heads of his drums, folks, or the gauge of his sticks. This man's mind is always working, and when you watch him drum, you can see exactly where he goes with that mind at times. And belonging to one of the big three rock bands of rock and roll history, Nick Mason happened to be in one of three bands that had equal partners in them. Just for his work with Pink Floyd, as a composer, as a direction for that band, he deserves the number 3 spot on my list. All right, so that brings us to the number 2 spot on my list, and that one belongs to a man of lunacy, a man who knows the true dark side of the moon, and that would be Mr. Keith Moon. There's only one drummer in rock and roll who could challenge this man for maniacal licks, fills that almost seem impossible to come up with, and a generalized lunacy while performing on stage. You know, as far as I'm concerned, The Who's entire stature was leveled up, not by their lead vocalist, not even by their leader. It was their rhythm section. Keith Moon, John Entwistle, who could beat him? Well, I can think of one exception to that rule, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. No. See, with Keith Moon and John Entwistle, you have one of the very best rhythm sections in rock and roll, bar none. So that gives me to number 2. And you know what? He happens to be in the very best rhythm section in rock and roll, bar none, and that is the mighty bonzo, Mr. John Bonham. Talk about compositional drumming. This man is as responsible for what Led Zeppelin came up with, structures of songs, everything, as any other key member in that band. You know, with the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, we are talking about 3 bands with 4 members of equal stature, each being super important to the other 3. And that's basically why these 3 bands stand so high in my estimations. These are true bands in every sense of what the word band could possibly mean. Okay, so he's my number 1 spot. I'm not gonna say a whole lot more than that about John Bonham. If you want my individual estimations on how truly great this man was as far as drumming is concerned, take a look at any of my Led Zeppelin videos. I'm pretty focused on exactly why this man is my very favorite drummer in rock, bar none. All right, so there's my list, and I know there's going to be a lot of disagreement with this list, and that's fine. Listen, I'm not the expert. I am a singer-songwriter. I am a bass player. I play a bit of drums. I've messed around in the music industry a bit, and I have a very definite set of opinions, no doubt. But that's it. My list should be no higher than yours. And I have gotten some amazing comments on this channel who disagree with my choices. And you know what? Very respectfully, they have told me right where I was wrong. And if you peruse any of the comments, you'll see. I'll admit, hey, that's a good point. I still stand by my point, but I can certainly see why you would think that. You know, it's at that time of the video where you're seeing names in front of me, and if you do, these are brand new subscribers to the channel, folks. They've just joined up since my last video, and a big thank you to each and every one of you. Welcome aboard. You know, they got here in such an easy fashion, you know? All they had to do was hit that subscribe to the tribe button, hit that top bell notification, and guess what? They've all been notified of all of my future videos, and so will you if you choose to subscribe to the tribe. A big thank you to viewers who haven't subscribed but are sharing our videos. Wonderful. And of course, I always encourage you, if you like tonight's video, give us a thumbs up. It does help the YouTube algorithm better recognize us. All right, so a quick video tonight, right to the point, and I hope I've hit you right between the eyes with at least something to think about. So now it's your turn. Let me know in the comments where I went wrong. Where is the dislogic in my thinking? Why should these drummers be listed elsewhere in rock's greatest drummer list? As usual, I'm all ears, folks. I want to know what you think. All right, so that's it for tonight's video. My list of my top 5 favorite drummers in rock. This is The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, and I'll see you in the next video.